Hello, and welcome back to another Pen Talk. Thank you very much for joining me as I explore the amazing, incredible wide world of pens. And yes, you see two rotating in front of you, and I think they're worthy of being on the rotating turntable, held up by two happy crabs, surrounded by all my pen friends. They admire these pens visually. And yes, they do look good. A lot of pen reviewers love to just trash the design and not creative and compare it to the pen that inspired this design. And I know what it takes to actually make a product, all the bits and pieces, dealing with subcontractors, assembling it in the factory. Regardless of what inspired the design, you still have to execute. And these pens have executed in various ways very well. And I appreciate that. And to me, a pen in a hand that you write with, you don't really care what inspired the look. All you're concerned about is, do I like writing with it? Does it feel good in my hand? Do I enjoy looking at it? Those are the important features, and hopefully I can show you those today. In this video. They're a little bit off balance. So I bought these both on Etsy from Easy Buy. I have a great relationship with Sally and Britton. They send me pens to review. There's one on the way, a vac filler, which looks very interesting. So the price I paid was a little bit higher than you might. I mean, you could search for low price. And you can go on eBay and search for low price, and you might find some sellers that have only been around for a while, and they're putting the pens at a low price, maybe to generate some customers, some sales. You know, it's a dog-eat-dog world out there. It's difficult to start up a business. Yes, you have all the social stuff involved. You're selling on a platform which takes their cut and could be quite significant. And you got to try to make a little bit of profit, try to sustain it, feed your family, whatever is your monetary needs. So I respect anybody who does that. And, I try to be very positive in my reviews. I'm honest. But I'm not going to trash something just for the sake of views. And negative reviews do get a lot more views than my pen reviews, but that's just me, and that's my editorial to start this video. Hopefully you've enjoyed watching these rotate. The two crabs going face to face are enjoying holding them up. So we're going to look at these in a little bit more detail, compare what's common and different between these two models, the P140 and the P141, and let you know what I think is the best value between these two pens and why. And you, in the end, have to decide what is important to you, what's worth taking money, hard-earned money from your pocket, and sending it to somebody and exchanging it for a writing instrument similar to these two in front of you. So hopefully, if you stick through the video, which most people don't, then you'll get an understanding, at least from my perspective, and visually, hopefully, you'll enjoy the visuals, because I pride myself in having excellent videos in my reviews. You'll make a decision as to whether any of these two pens, or both of them, might be pens that you would love to own and have and write with. Stay tuned. So let's talk about what these pens have in common. Well, the obvious visual thing is they both seem to have the same clip. So Majohn has used the same design and size of that clip on their P136 as they did on the P140 and 141. Obviously, it's a larger ring there at the top to accommodate a larger pen, but that shape and size is very distinctive. And the clip is fairly stiff, but it's springy and it's usable, which is what a clip is all about. They're both large pens. They both have rounded ends. They're both piston fillers. And they both have a number 8 nib, but it's a different nib, not the same in both of these pens. This has more traditional cap bands that you might see on other pens. And this one has more of what I would call a Majohn type of band at the end of the cap. In this you have exposed plastic. This one you have that cap band protecting the edge of the cap, which I think is functionally a better design feature. The 141 has a little brass insert in there for aesthetic reasons, nothing functional about it. But the acrylic in this 140 is just beautiful. Yes, it's kind of optical grade. People have talked about that. Turned acrylic, injection molded. Could it be made from precious resin? Ooh. This is engraved in the cap band, so you know it's a Majohn. There's no markings on the 140 except that is on the nib, as you can see through that clear cap. It's a beautiful looking nib, really unique design. And here the nib is opposite the clip, and it's a multi-threaded cap, so you can get the nib to be right underneath the clip, depending upon what your visual preference is. So this one takes 1, 2, a little bit over 2 turns to get the cap off. This one takes 1 1/4. So that's a big difference between the two pens. And while we have the caps off, let's look at those nibs and compare them. So I would say the fact that this has Moon Man on it, and its design has been around for a long time, versus Majohn on the 140. The 141 is kind of a strange mix of components. If you flip them over, you'll notice feed here, which some people say is ebonite, and I can't disagree with that, versus a injection molded plastic feed on the 141. The sections are somewhat similar. That's not to distinguish between the two pens. It's a fairly beefy section, is what you would expect with that large number 8 nib. They're both about the same length. But one of the differences is this is a heavier pen than the 141, and primarily I think turned acrylic is a little bit denser than I think injection molded, and also, as you can see very clearly, this piston is 100% brass. As you turn the piston knob, you'll see that that piston rod is also made out of brass, so there's a lot of weight in that filling system. In this pen, the 141, the piston, it's just not as good of a piston filler. But you notice it is brass here. And they both use that little feet thing from Asvine, the Asvine tool. You can unscrew that piston assembly, and a couple of people have done that. And JG3 did a nice little look at the one in the 141. And the piston rod in here is plastic. And the piston itself, the seal, is done a little bit differently. And I think that explains what some people don't like about this piston cap here, is there's slack in it. And I think that's because the piston rod here doesn't really match up well with the threading of the brass pieces, and that's something that was not good in the engineering and design of this 141. So what came first, 140 or 141? Good question. The 141 also cost about $10 US less, approximately. You can look around. The 140 now comes in solid color, so if you don't want a transparent pen, you can still get the 140 to suit your styles. There's a nice little ink window in the 141, which is nice. But this piston really feels premium. No slack. You can see a little movement of the cap moves the piston here. There's almost a 3/4 turn where nothing happens. And then once you engage the piston, it turns very smoothly. Both of them turn smoothly. It's just that this has a more refined feel to it. You might ask if the caps are interchangeable, and they are not. As the pen rolls off my little table. Those threads don't even come close to matching up on those pens. So that's interesting. So how did these pens come to be what they are? And now here's where I'm going to use a little bit of creative thinking, one might say. So I think the 140 came first from a design aspect. And the subcontractors and everybody else that they got together to make this pen, Majohn, the marketing group, or whoever is deciding what pens they're going to make and sell, decided that they liked that design, but they wanted to make something with less cost. So they went to injection molded plastic, and they put some plastic bits in the piston and lowered the price by about 25%. Is that significant? It depends upon value. To me, it's not a significant price difference. This is on the higher end of Chinese pens. This is on the middle end, the $30 versus $40. And that's what I see of these two pens. And I don't remember number 8 nibs being on other earlier versions of Moonman pens, but there's certainly one on this one. So we're going to ink these up and see how those nibs perform. And they both have a O-ring towards the nib end, and the 141 has also an O-ring at the end, which probably seals up against that gasket inside of the barrel. So I like this because when you dip the nib into a bottle of ink and you pull up ink, that O-ring stops ink from getting in between the nib assembly and the section, which then could possibly leak out. And a number of people have talked about that happening with pens, where they get ink coming out and they think there might be a problem with the pen, but I think it's just the fact that the O-ring is not doing its job if they have one. But again, I like the design with that O-ring there. But these pens do have a lot of significant differences between them. So we talked about these two Moonman Majohn nib assemblies. So let's bring in an Asvine number 8 nib assembly. Again, it's different. They're very different. Similar O-rings here and here. And it's also a fine nib. And if you can compare it to the Moonman Fine, you'll see this is very thinner, smaller, less tipping on there. So a lot of viewers like comparisons. So here we are with 4 transparent demonstrator pens with gold-colored trim, various filling mechanisms. Here's the P140, which is the purpose and subject of this review, piston filler. Here's that great Asvine V800 I recently reviewed, which is a vacuum filler. Here's a Majohn C4 eyedropper, Japanese style, with a shutoff valve. And a Jinhao 9019, which has always been a stalwart pen. This is the girthiest pen of the group, but they all are good-sized pens. Number 8, number 8, number 8 nib, number 6 nib. That short clip, which was very controversial, and to me, it does the job it's supposed to do. I don't care. But those are 4 examples of clear pens with gold trim. Here they are uncapped, and they all have fairly short sections and fairly girthy sections. Again, the 9019 is the largest of the group. And as you can see, it's a cartridge converter, so again, 4 different filling systems. And of course, the nib on the C4 looks tiny compared to these number 8 versions. Let's look a little closer. Yes, the number 8 nibs look really nice. Great design. I love the design. Just an old style Moonman number 5 nib here. And the Jinhao nib, which is a nice two-tone nib. Classic look. Medium. Fine. Fine. And medium. And the tipping material is fairly similar on these 4 nibs. And they all write well. Enjoy. So one of the things people talked about is softness of nib. So I'm going to put what I would consider to be a normal amount of pressure to flex a steel nib, and you can see those tines open up quite nicely. So let's take the 140 and do what I would consider about the same amount of pressure, and the tines open about the same amount, maybe slightly more, but not significantly more. This is a medium nib where the 141 only comes in extra fine and fine, so obviously I like medium nibs, and this is going to lay down a wider line with no pressure than the 141 fine nib does, and so therefore when you flex it, it's going to produce a wider line even though the nib may open up the same amount. Yes, new pen day, I got this incredible Majohn C2000 in Sunset, which I'll be doing a review on shortly. So these are the two inks I decided to use. We can obviously see when I write which ink went in which pen. And here are the inks on a paper towel. Copper chloride, ultramarine. Ultramarine is super saturated, very dense. I think it has some sheen to it. Copper chloride is just a beautiful color. I like it. This is my first fill on the P140. As you can see, it's pretty much almost full. A few bubbles in there. We're going to go up and down one more time. But that's 1.6 milliliters. A decent amount of ink. So that's my second fill. As you can see, I got 0.2 milliliters more ink, and it's almost 100% full. Still a few little bubbles in there, but that's fine. That's a lot of ink, good ink. And this piston works extremely well at filling the pen. So with the 141, I can't show you the different ink levels, but I did the first fill. Got 1.4 milliliters. I weigh it before and after filling. And I did a second fill, and I got exactly the same weight. So there was no additional ink from the second fill, which is unusual in my experience with piston fillers. But as we discussed, the inside of this piston rod and the actual piston itself is a different design in the P141, and I think that is why we don't get as much ink up. This is my first writings with the pens after filling. And the 141 is a finer line, but not by as much. Apologize about the feathering, but you can definitely see it's a darker ink and it looks wetter, at least from this perspective. And if we look at how I flex the nib, the actual line difference with no pressure is not significantly different between the fine and the medium. With pressure, the fine opens up, but the medium opens up even more, which I mentioned might be a function of the fact there's more tipping material there and it lays down more ink. It flexes about the same as we saw earlier. I think you could tell from watching my writing and hearing how the nib works on the paper, this is a great nib. And as usual, my brain had a fart, and it's a medium nib, not a fine. I have a number of fine nibs recently in pens, and I get confused. No longer confused. This Birmingham Pen Company copper chloride is an excellent ink. I really enjoy it. And as you can see here, it lays down a fairly fine line, and a little bit of pressure, it opens up and lays down more ink, and it takes a while to dry. Typical of a very wet nib. And this paper is not exactly extremely coated, but coated enough to have the ink pool on top and take a while for it to evaporate into a dry state. Hopefully you've enjoyed watching me write. So we've come to the ending of this long video on two pens that I think are worthy of the explorations that we've done. So there's a couple questions in your mind. Which one do I prefer? I think that's obvious. It's the P140. I love the way that it feels, a little bit of extra weight, turned acrylic, brass piston. You know, it's just a better made pen, and it's a few dollars more. It varies. You can shop around and get it for almost around $40. The 141 is just not quite up to the same level as the 140 as far as build and design. It's just, you know, a more traditional pen, but now that the 140 comes in solid colors, that's one of the differences between these two. If you didn't like a demonstrator, then you went for the 141. But the other question comes about is the nib. This has that Sun Moon nib on it, which seems to be a newer model of nib, and this one has an older style nib. Well, now I found the 141 comes with that Sun nib, so that's a change. So you can get a solid color 141 with a nib from the 140. I know it gets confusing. If you try to buy separate nibs, they say that one nib only fits the 140, one nib only fits the 141. I have some 140 Sun nibs on order that come in. I also have already purchased some Majohn number 8 nibs that I was going to use in some other pens. So if I get motivated, I may do a video and show you the difference between the nibs and whether they're worth trying to swap if that's what you want to do. When I looked at the 140 in colors, a lot of new sellers are selling it. And if you pick the Sun nib, whatever, it limits your color choices. So one of the thoughts that I've had about the way the Chinese pen market works is people sometimes just buy the pen in pieces and then they do the assembly. Number one, it saves on labor costs, hopefully, if they do that in-house versus have somebody else do it and have to mark it up. And it also gives them the opportunity of putting together parts in different combinations than people that buy the pen already made with whatever versions of that model that the maker wants to sell them at. You know, there's a reseller market, which is what we deal with in the Western countries. So I know this was a long video. Hopefully I put enough stuff in it to make it worthwhile. And these are two pens that I think a lot of people have been interested in. And I hope at the end of this video you're able to decide which one you may or may not want to own and why. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on that. If you have one, let me know. If you have both, that's even better. Let me know what your feel of the differences between them. So, I hope this video found everyone safe, healthy, and happy, enjoying your life, your pens, your inks, your papers. Put your pens to work. Put your pen holders to work if you happen to have a few. So we reached a conclusion, the end, and we will say bye-bye. Have a great day.